Hey everybody, what is going on? Hexlex here. Got another Master Duel video for you. So today I wanted to talk to you a little bit about synchro summoning, which, as a lot of you probably know, is my favorite summoning mechanic, but it's also a summoning mechanic that has been seeing a lot of power creep lately in recent card releases in the TCG/OCG. Well, most of these cards we're going to talk about today aren't out in the TCG yet, but there is at least one that is, and these cards are not only promoting synchro summoning, but they're so powerful that they are single-handedly warping the meta towards one that is gravitating towards synchro-based decks. And as much as I really like synchro summoning, I will say this video is more of a warning than anything else, because this is, if anything, that I've seen in the OCG meta reports is an indication of what's going to happen in Master Duel. These are things that you definitely need to know about well in advance before they come out. Now, I'm not saying these cards are about to come out in Master Duel anytime soon. In fact, I think we've probably got at least a couple of months before we start seeing any of them. But I do think that it's better to have this knowledge well in advance, right? So I wanted to make sure that I was spreading the word about the upcoming Turn Zero synchro-based meta. As always, got to give a huge shout out to the YouTube members for supporting the channel. If you are interested in seeing content like this early, as soon as it's uploaded rather than when it's released, then you can join as a member down next to the subscribe button below. I also occasionally post members-only content, and as with Patreon subscribers, you will get your name featured at the end credits of every video. Alright, let's go ahead and get right on into these cards that I think are really important to talk about. Starting with the one that we've got on screen here, it's called Fidraulis Harmonia, which is a Dark Dragon Tuner effect monster, level 7, 2500 attack, 2000 defense, that says, when your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, quick effect, you can reveal this card in your hand and up to 5 synchro monsters in your extra deck. Apply these effects in sequence based on the total number revealed. Also, you cannot activate the effects of monsters special summoned from the extra deck until the end of your next turn, except synchro monsters. If you reveal 2 or more, special summon this card. If you reveal 4 or more, send 1 of the revealed synchro monsters to the graveyard. And if you reveal 6, that meaning this card and 5 synchro monsters, you can destroy 1 monster your opponent controls. You can only use this effect of Fidraulis Harmonia once per turn. Now, this card has, without exaggeration at all, single-handedly warped the OCG metagame. Basically, the idea here is that you are always wanting to send 5, because not only does that destroy the monster on the field, while you don't negate the effect, this is really helpful for stopping your opponent from setting up their plays, but getting to also send a synchro monster is definitely a good thing when you consider cards like, for starters, Herald of the Arclight, which definitely makes Mitsurugi a lot more threatening. On top of that, there's also the level 6 Golden Cloud Beast, Malong, I think it's called, the one that bounces a card when it's sent to the graveyard. And don't forget the level 8 Enigmatic Packbit Enigmaster, something like that. That's the one that lets you push a monster into the back row and treat it as a continuous trap card. Now, there is also the fact that having a level 7 tuner on your field is highly advantageous to a lot of decks. Off the top of my head, we have Yummy, right? With its level 1 non-tuners, and it already has the ability to play Boreload Savage Dragon, makes that a lot more accessible through the Fidraulis Harmonia. You might not necessarily want to play this in Yummy though, because this card does lock you into only synchro summoning from the extra deck. So Yummy, for example, would not be able to link summon. However, there are plenty of decks that only synchro summon that absolutely do not care about this at all. Thinking about Cool Tune in particular, which is an archetype we haven't seen yet in Master Duel, but through multiple waves of support is already dominating, on top of the fact that now Fidraulis Harmonia is giving it a huge boost because it is a synchro-based deck. On top of that, Mitsurugi, as mentioned, can not only send Herald of the Arclight in order to add Habakiri and go into plays, but being a ritual-based deck, it doesn't actually care about being locked into only synchro summons from the extra deck, because it can still do all of its own plays within its engine, being a main deck only archetype. As you can see, The Fidraulis Harmonia is just absolutely insane. Like, consider that when you reveal 6, you are summoning a monster, popping one of your opponent's cards, and then also either getting a free search or getting rid of yet another card on your opponent's field. This alone is enough to stop a vast majority of decks from setting up altogether. And even though it doesn't negate the monster effect, again, multiple forms of removal is just going to be enough, even through extenders a lot of the time. Definitely look to see Fidraulis Harmonia in not just the decks I've mentioned, but probably a lot of other upcoming ones as well, especially again considering some other synchro-leaning cards that we'll talk about here. This next card I'd like to talk about is one that was only very, very recently released in the Heroes Limit Over collection. It's one of those cards with the extended frame art, which by the way I do really hope we get in Master Duel. But this is a card that can act as a lot of synchro-based turn 0 plays, pretty much by itself. Well, with another monster in hand. Let's read. This is Synchro Emergency, a normal trap card that says if only your opponent controls a monster, you can activate this card from your hand. Special summon one monster from your hand, but negate its effects. Then, if your opponent controls a monster special summoned from the extra deck, you can special summon one synchro monster from your deck. Until the end of the next turn after this card resolves, you cannot special summon from the extra deck except synchro monsters. You can banish this card from your graveyard. Immediately after this effect resolves, synchro summon one synchro monster. You can only activate one Synchro Emergency per turn. Now, that's not you can only use one of its effects per turn, it means you can only activate one of these, which means you can get both the summon and the banish effect on the same turn, even your opponent's first turn. So it's really obvious to see just how powerful this card is, right? Just right off the top of my head, the first most obvious application I could think of is just being able to Black Rose Dragon at any point during your opponent's turn, assuming, of course, they have a monster special summoned from the extra deck. Now, you would want to make sure that you're doing this before your opponent has any negates up, of course, but being able to wipe all cards off the board, you know, as we mentioned with Fidraulis Harmonia, which we just got done talking about, disrupting your opponent by removing multiple monsters from the board is often enough to end their turn, even if they have an extender in hand. So being able to Black Rose Dragon wipe all cards is not only good against monster-based combos, but even if you're up against, like, a very back row heavy deck, right? Like Odeon, which would special summon from the extra deck and also set a ton of cards. You could go end phase, you know, go into the Black Rose Dragon, and then your opponent doesn't have a chance to activate any of their face down cards. And that's just one application, by the way. You could go into any synchro monster with this. The only stipulation is that you have to summon a synchron monster from your deck, which is like so fine. There are so many different synchron monsters out there that depending on what deck you're playing and what archetypes you're trying to go into from the extra deck, or not archetypes necessarily, but plays, then you can include any number of synchron monsters, right? Now, it is worth noting that, like the Fidraulis Harmonia, this is going to lock you into only summoning synchro monsters from the extra deck until the end of the next turn. And I actually don't know how I feel about this specific kind of lock. And here's why. Because obviously you don't want an effect like this to be like super duper generic, as in you don't want your opponent to be able to just go into anything after following up with a synchro summon on the opponent's turn 1. However, I think between both this and Fidraulis, by making these cards synchro decks only, what you're doing is instead making it so that synchro-based decks have this huge power imbalance in their favor, because they can use these cards that are so powerful, and again, both hand trap turn 0 plays, that it really makes all non-synchro-based decks weaker, not by virtue of synchro decks themselves being better, but these generic tools, generic for synchro decks, being so powerful in and of themselves, and also locking you into synchro summons. And again, as somebody who has historically on this channel just gone on about how much they love synchro summons, I'm not a big fan of this. I don't know if I'm into this, like, you know, artificial inflation of an extra deck method's power level. I don't know. It's just an interesting spot to end up in. I mean, of course, it goes without saying that this isn't just a good disruptive tool. You could also just set up your own combos during your opponent's turn, making your deck a lot more consistent. Like, you know, let's say you open a hand that's got this and a bunch of hand traps, and you would have normally just top-decked another hand trap. Well, if you have a non-tuner among your hand traps, you can Synchro Emergency summon it, go for a Synchron, and then if you're on, you know, even like a Synchron deck, for example, you could make Junk Speeder during your opponent's end phase and set up your board to just start comboing on your turn. It's got a ton of applications that are all really, really powerful. And I don't know, listen, power creep's a part of Yu-Gi-Oh! That's not the thing I'm like necessarily kind of about here. It's just that giving this power creep to only synchro-based decks is a little bit weird. And again, it makes this sort of artificial inflation of a specific subset of decks power level that I'm not necessarily a big fan of. So when talking about synchro monsters and also talking about power creep, I think we also need to mention this synchro monster in particular, Zalen, the Shackled Dragon. This is a Dark Dragon Synchro Tuner effect monster, level 7, 2800 attack, 2100 defense. Its material requirements are 1 tuner plus 1 or more synchro monsters. Note that it doesn't say synchro non-tuner, so it could even be a tuner plus another synchro tuner, worth noting. It states, if this card you control would be used as synchro material, you can treat it as a non-tuner. When a card or effect is activated in response to another card or effect activation, quick effect, you can activate one of these effects. Negate the first effect, and if you do, destroy that card, or negate the second effect, and if you do, destroy that card. You can only use this effect of Zalen, the Shackled Dragon, once per turn. So, this is the first card in Yu-Gi-Oh! That sort of directly addresses chain blocking, which is the process of having an effect that you really want to resolve. So you activate it as Chainlink 1, then chaining another card effect as Chainlink 2. That way your opponent has to respond to the Chainlink 2 effect and cannot stop the Chainlink 1 effect. Zalen, in that situation, would come on as Chainlink 3 and could either stop the card on Chainlink 2 or the thing your opponent's really trying to resolve on Chainlink 1. This is something that, again, has come up a lot in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! A lot of modern Yu-Gi-Oh's combo lines will have built-in protection against certain hand traps by method of chain blocking. However, Zalen gets around that. And it's also worth noting that while this card does not lock you into only synchro summons like the other two, it is still very synchro focused, right? Like, you need at least one synchro monster just to even make this, and it itself is also a synchro tuner. It also doesn't care, again, if you use multiple tuners as long as one of them is a synchro monster, allowing for synchro-based decks to include this very, very easily, while any other deck that wanted to try to include this, if it doesn't already play a lot of synchro, combo lines, would have to go pretty far out of its way to do so. Which again seems like a pretty direct buff for only a specific subset of decks. Which, although, again, I've said it a couple of times now, while I'm a huge fan of synchro decks, I don't think it's fair to only give one kind of deck, in particular, this much of a buff. So where does that leave us? Well, I think that Konami is definitely pointing the game in a very specific direction with this stage of power creep, right? I don't know if we're gonna see maybe some other sort of benefits for other summoning methods. I think it's kind of worth noting, not nearly to the same degree, but it's kind of worth noting that with the hero cards, Super Polymerization in particular got a lot more powerful, as a lot of the new Hero Fusion monsters from the Limit Over collection are actually really generic in their material requirements, which makes Super Polymerization even more powerful. I don't know if that's Konami's way of attempting to buff fusion summoning, but I'd be interested to see if we do see some more very powerful generic support for the different summoning methods. Now, if they all had, at the same point in time, 3 cards of this caliber, then I think things could be interesting, especially if those cards did slightly different things to disrupt the opponent. Then we could start seeing this stage of hand traps slash generic extra deck tools, but only generic within, you know, a specific kind of summoning method, which I think really nicely rides that line of like being generic enough to be useful for a lot of decks, but not so much that it's just included in 90% of all decks, right? But as long as it's only going to exist for synchro summoning, then I'm like, okay, where's everybody else's tools, you know? We'll just have to see how things play out from here. In any case, like I said, I thought these cards were really worth talking about, so thanks for watching, especially if you did all the way to the end here. I think it's time now to move on to our outro, where we can thank our YouTube members and Patreon subscribers. Hey everybody, Hexlex here. Thank you so very much for watching all the way to the very end of the video, which by the way is one of the best ways to support the channel. Speaking of supporting the channel, take a look at the names on screen. These are folks who have been so generous as to either join as a YouTube member or subscribe over on patreon.com/Hexlex to support. There's also perks for doing so. If you would like to see YouTube videos early, as well as some exclusive videos that get uploaded to YouTube, but for one reason or another I decide not to publish, definitely go ahead and hit that join button to see content early, as well as some exclusive content. If you're looking for more exclusive content, over on patreon.com, I upload exclusive videos that are not posted on YouTube just about every single day. Whether you choose to subscribe over on Patreon, join as a YouTube member, or simply continue to watch, your support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so very much. But for now, this is Hexlex. I am signing out, and I hope that you have a fantastic day.